Hello, I'm Sachi Yanari-Rizzo, Curator of Prints and Drawings. Every other month, I present a talk in the Print and Drawing Study Center and offer it virtually. For this season of Print Room Talks, we have been going back to the basics of printmaking. In this series, we have been exploring various printmaking processes together, learning technical terms, and hopefully fostering an appreciation and love of prints. I've been using this image for each talk because it outlines the 4 different categories of printmaking processes that we are covering over the course of the year. In September, we focused on relief prints, in which the block material is carved away, leaving the printed surface higher or in relief. The red in the slide represents the ink. Wood and linoleum are commonly used for relief prints. In November and February, we looked at intaglio, which includes engraving, dry point, mezzotint, etching, and aquatint. Whether they are physical marks made by tools or bitten by acid, intaglio processes have grooves and channels that are below the surface of the matrix. The matrix in this case is usually a thin metal plate. In April, we looked at lithography. It is often referred to as a planographic process, meaning that the image area is in the same plane as the matrix. This is unlike relief and intaglio, where there is a physical difference in height between the inked and uninked areas. For this last talk of the season, we will look at screenprint, which is also referred to as silkscreen and serigraphy. Screen printing is appealing because it does not require expensive materials and equipment, as they can be hand printed, and it does not require extensive training. The screen prints shown here demonstrate the medium's versatility in fine art prints. Another application that we see daily is screen printed fabric, which has been commonly used for clothing and home decor. Master printer Norm Stewart observed in 2014, "It's impossible to go through a day without coming in contact with screen printing. The type on golf balls is screen printed. The instrumentation on the dashboard of automobiles is screen printed. Electrical circuit boards are screen printed with conductive inks. Puff inks are screen printed on t-shirts to give a raised texture. Ceramic glazes are screen printed on glasses and mugs, etc. The general public is surrounded with examples of screen printing. They just don't realize it." Here are some basic requirements to do screen printing. First, you need a screen. A fine mesh fabric is stretched over a wood frame. The material of the screen was initially made of silk, hence the term silkscreen. Now synthetic polyester is often used. Different types of materials are better suited for printing on paper versus printing on fabric. The screen fabric ranges from coarse to fine, which is necessary for exacting detail. Screens can be purchased pre-stretched. Otherwise, polyester is sold in bulk on a roll. It is possible to stretch your own screen, and frames can be made of wood or aluminum. The primary tool is a squeegee. There are 3 of them on the right. A squeegee has a handle that holds a flexible blade, which comes in different lengths and vary from hard to soft depending on the project. A medium blade is typically used for printing on paper. A soft blade is required for a more textured surface like canvas, which has an uneven printing surface. And there are even different shaped tips. These images were taken from my visit to an open house at Robert Blackburn's printmaking workshop years ago. The essential concept behind screen printing is the use of a stencil. Areas of the screen are masked by a stencil to produce the design. The stencil blocks all areas except the design that is intended to be printed. The screen is laid directly over a surface, whether it's paper, a t-shirt, or a canvas tote bag. A line of ink is applied along the upper part of the screen, which you see on the left. When pulling a squeegee across the screen, a thick charge of ink is forced through the stencil that is affixed to the fabric mesh screen to the paper below. Solid parts of the stencil block the ink from transferring through the screen onto the paper. Unlike the other methods we've covered, screen printing is the only process that does not print an image in reverse. It isn't necessary to have an elaborate setup to print by hand. Here the screen is hinged to the table surface to ensure that proper registration is maintained as the artist raises and lowers the screen. Screen printing presses, though, come in different forms, from flatbed, cylinder, and rotary machines. Stencils or masking can be made of a non-porous material such as a hand-cut film or paper attached to the underside of the screen, or using glue and shellac combined with a resist material. Another method is to thinly coat the screen with a light-sensitive emulsion in a dark room. This is the pink substance visible in Dennis McNett's screen that is on view in the Print and Drawing Study Center. The design is drawn on a stencil film and it is placed on the screen. When the screen is exposed to light, the areas behind the design, or the drawn areas, remain soft because it is protected from the light. The undrawn areas are unprotected or uncovered, so the emulsion hardens. In this case, a light exposure unit can be helpful, as seen in the upper right. When the screen is sprayed with a power washer, the unexposed areas that remain soft rinse away. If we were to hold up McNett's screen, we would be able to see through the outlines of the owl. Screenprint is one of the newer techniques and doesn't have a long history like engraving or woodcut. While we cannot identify a date for the process's invention, stencils were its antecedent and were used to make multiple copies in China and Japan. In Europe, stencils were used for adding color to printed pieces, and they were used to apply decoration to furniture, fabric, and wallpaper. Screenprint's earliest use in the US was at the very beginning of the 20th century for making posters and advertisements, as well as reproductive prints of paintings. The earliest artistic screenprint was made in 1932 with Guy McCoy's prints, Woman Holding a Cat in Still Life. In 1938, Contemporary Arts, a New York City gallery, gave the artist a solo exhibition, the first gallery exhibition of screenprints. The Federal Art Project was a government-funded program under the New Deal during the Depression that put artists back to work and stimulate the economy. It supported writing, the performing arts, painting, sculpture, photography, and the graphic arts. It was fairly inexpensive to set up and run a screen printing shop. In 1935, the Federal Art Project initiated a poster division in New York that produced posters for various art projects and government departments. And we see a couple of examples from the Federal Art Project. Anthony Vilonis, whose work is seen here, began experimenting with stencils, touche, texture, and color overprinting. The WPA administration permitted him to form a screenprint unit. He authored a technical pamphlet on the process, which was disseminated to the WPA art centers across the country. This fostered enthusiasm and a wide knowledge of the medium across the country in the 1940s. In 1941, print curator Carl Ziegrosser at the Philadelphia Museum of Art gave the process a new name, serigraphy. Seri meaning silk in Latin, and graphos meaning to draw in Greek. Ziegrosser had the intention of separating fine art screen printing from its commercial applications. This work by Yasuo Kuniyoshi, entitled The Little Pond from 1942, is the earliest screen print in the collection. Born in Japan, Kuniyoshi immigrated to the US and trained under Robert Henry and Kenneth Hayes Miller at the Art Students League, and was regularly included in group exhibitions at the Museum of Modern Art beginning in 1930. During World War II, he wasn't incarcerated like Japanese Americans on the West Coast. However, his camera and binoculars were confiscated, perceived as potential spy equipment. His bank account was frozen, and he was denied American citizenship. After the war, he became the first living artist granted a retrospective at the Whitney Museum of American Art in 1948. Kuniyoshi approached screenprint in a very painterly manner and greatly resembled the subdued, earthy palette and the feel of his oil paintings during the 1920s and 30s, as seen on the right. In this detail, we can see that brushiness, that painterly quality, and how a screen print can sometimes be distinguished by the wove pattern of the screen, which is impressed onto the surface of the ink. Self-taught artist Carol Rama was largely unfamiliar outside of Italy. In the 1950s, she worked in geometric abstraction in the concrete art movement. Concrete art, originally based in Switzerland and France, referred to the belief that art should be made from, quote, concrete elements of form and color, without allusions to the physical world. This untitled screen print by Rama is again a relatively early example of the medium in the collection. Unlike Kuniyoshi, Rama embraced the screen print's strengths as she layered colorful geometric shapes. Because this process deposits a thicker charge of ink on the paper than other methods, it produces flat, unmodulated areas of color. If the ink is too thin, it will run or blot. When colors overlap, they seem to be sitting on top of each other. World War II cut short this surge in enthusiasm for the medium on the part of artists and collectors. We see more isolated works through the 1950s. It wouldn't be until the 1960s, when pop artists revived interest in the medium, that there would be a widespread use of the medium then. Several British artists began experimenting with screen print in the mid-1950s, and its popularity surpassed that in the US by the 1960s. Although their beginnings were modest, by working off an old kitchen table, Christopher Prater and his wife Rose opened Kelpra Studio and became the main place for artists to go to work on screen prints in England. American master printer Ken Tyler credits Prater with single-handedly moving screen printing from a commercial medium to a fine art form. While there were printmaking workshops forming in the US in the 1950s, their specialty was in lithography. Edoardo Paolozzi and David Hockney's prints were both made at Kelpra Studio. Paolozzi put together collages culled from his collection of printed ephemera, including magazines, engineering diagrams, and pulp books. He worked at Kelpra Studio to translate these collages into print form. David Hockney's screen print, Cleanliness is Next to Godliness, was based on a photograph from the Beefcake magazine Physique Pictorial. Hockney enjoyed the irony in using this image that evokes a wholesome ideal. He learned that the real-life models for the magazines were young boys in Los Angeles, sometimes recently released from prison, willing to pose nude in pools and showers for extra cash. Moving away from the gestural, highly personal, abstract, expressionist painting, pop art made a dramatic shift in subject matter and technique. They borrowed imagery and bright colors from advertising, mass media, and retail objects. Artists in the 1960s, here in the US, like Andy Warhol, popularized the use of screen print as an art form. Warhol's first paintings involving screen printing were all made in 1962. Some considered them screen prints on canvas. Desiring a more assembly line effect, Warhol tried the medium, commenting that, quote, with silk screening, you pick a photograph, blow it up, transfer it in glue to silk, and then roll ink across it so the ink goes through the silk but not through the glue. That way you get the same image, slightly different each time. It was so simple, quick, and chancy. I was thrilled with it. While his earliest stencils were hand-cut, for his famous Maryland series and most subsequent work, Etna Silkscreen Products translated his source images into photographic silkscreen stencils. Screen printing was inexpensive, fast, allowed for repetition, and lent itself well to delegation of production, which distanced the artist more from the work. This began a paradigm shift from the emphasis on the artist's handwork to a more about the concept and idea. After a visit to see Andy Warhol's studio, Robert Rauschenberg began silkscreening paintings in 1962. He mined images from newspapers, his own photos, and magazines like Life, National Geographic, and Esquire. Rauschenberg enlisted the help of Etna Silkscreen Products as well to help make the approximately 50 screens he would reuse in different works between 1962 to 1964. Surface Series 40, shown here, is part of a group of screen prints in which he clipped headlines from current events featured in newspapers. Made in 1970, the beginning of a new decade, he made the series to heighten people's awareness of what was happening in the world. Images are shown as a mix of negative and positive forms. Although the moire dot pattern is usually undesirable in commercial printing, Rauschenberg, along with Roy Lichtenstein, embraced the half-tone dots. Corita Kent, also known as Sister Mary Corita, was a Catholic nun who became a beloved pop artist. She entered the Order of the Immaculate Heart of Mary in Los Angeles in 1936. She studied at the Immaculate Heart College and attended University of Southern California for graduate school, where she began screen printing. She was remembered for her teaching at Immaculate Heart College and for her joyous, inspirational messages in her work. She referenced texts including psalms, Beatles lyrics, ads, and poetry. Ken takes advantage of the way that the opaque colors layer on top of each other. She piles the phrase hip-deep involvement and the inverted word ornery on top, an excerpt that reads, "Be patient" by German poet Rainer Maria Rilke. The ochre and magenta colors, the flowing movement, and style of typeface are like the Sea Queen, forming a diptych. The pair are printed on a single sheet in Skidmore College's impression. The addition of words and phrases give us even more possible combinations and associations between the images. Screen printing offered ideal properties that many artists sought in the 1960s and 70s. Photorealist Richard Estes was among a number of artists in the late 1960s who created highly realistic images marked by detailed precision through the aid of photographs taken from different angles. He was drawn to cityscapes featuring contemporary architecture, storefronts, and empty streets. Despite the initial impression of realism, Estes actually reduced his subject to essential forms and focused on the effect of light, making reflections on glass and metal surfaces. 10 Doors is from his series entitled Urban Landscapes and depicts the entrance to the Minneapolis Auditorium that was torn down in the late 1980s. Although a public point of entry, it is empty, evoking a loneliness like Edward Hopper. Screenprint was well suited for Estes's compositions with the strong linearity of the facade that is made up of flat planes of metal and glass, devoid of a human presence. Screenprint's ability to produce sharp edges and smooth, opaque areas of color was the perfect medium as color became the subject of the artwork. Minimalists and hard-edge abstractionists like Ilya Bolotowski on the left were attracted to the medium's precision. Bolotowski felt that the forms in his work could communicate feelings of a timeless harmony. Victor Vasarely on the right was considered the father and leader of op art in the 1960s, whose pattern geometric abstractions demonstrated their interest in color and its effect on visual perception, spatial relations, and optical illusions. They utilized crisply drawn shapes, carefully placed and colored, to create mesmerizing optical effects. Figurative painter Jacob Lawrence took advantage of the relative ease of using a spectrum of colors through multiple screens. His involvement with printmaking was minimal before the age of 46 when he pursued it in earnest. In the 1940s, Lawrence asserted, "For me, a painting should have three things: universality, clarity, and strength. Universalities so that it may be understood by all men, clarity and strength so that it may be aesthetically good." He preferred painting in tempera and gouache, both opaque water-based mediums, for his narratives that fuse figuration and abstraction. Screenprint boasted its ability to produce clean and clearly articulated forms. The 1920s, The Migrants Cast Their Ballots, revisits the 59th panel from Lawrence's Migration series. In 1940 to 1941, over 30 years earlier, the artist created an epic 60-panel series of tempera paintings focusing on the Great Migration from the South. He viewed the series as a single piece and approached it like a portrait of the community, revealing struggle and resilience. In contrast to the original painting, the 1974 Screenprint's composition is more complex and the colors brighter. Lawrence increased the number of figures, included more individualized information about the voters. He depicted facial features, different types of clothing, mothers, couples, and the elderly. The artist eliminated the menacing security officer too. At the peak of the composition is a man casting his ballot. For the newly relocated, it was empowering being able to vote. Despite the 15th Amendment of 1870 granting African Americans the right to vote, various state laws were put in place to restrict this, including literacy tests and poll taxes. It is estimated that only 3% of Black citizens in the South were registered to vote in 1940. The bold graphic quality of the medium lends itself well for making political posters, as in Esther Hernandez's print Sun Raid. While attending University of California, Berkeley in the 1970s, she became interested in printmaking and became involved in the Mexican-American struggle for civil rights. In the Fort Wayne Museum of Art Screenprint, Hernandez reimagines the Sun-Made Raisins familiar corporate logo using the same colors, typeface, and layout. The artist updated the word maid for raid. The amiable maiden is now skeletal, is in a traditional Mexican dress, and wears a wrist monitor from the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE for short. Hernandez turns to satire in the spirit of Jose Guadalupe Posada, who used skeletons and skulls in relief prints and mocked 19th century Mexican society. Instead of a list of ingredients, there are names of Mexican indigenous groups in Oaxaca, Mexico, from where many undocumented farm workers in the U.S. come. Created during an increase in workplace raids during the George W. Bush administration, Hernandez uses a humorous biting approach. It concisely summarizes the plight of Mexican and Mexican Americans. At the same time, the artist uses the same tools of manipulation and branding and advertising to upend the original product message and to dismantle public trust. Works by Crystal Wagner and Sam Coronado show off how Screenprint affords the opportunity to print with a wide range of inks. Pop artists opened up the possibilities of color when they began printing with fluorescent inks that were previously relegated to use on posters and billboards. Wagner's print is aptly named Chroma, and intricate lines and shapes are set off by highly saturated fluorescent combinations. Sam Coronado contrasts a fine metallic copper ink set against the rich purple, adding a luster and regalness that is appropriate for this ancient figure. Sky Cole was a king who ruled from circa 785 to 795 in a Maya city-state in Guatemala. Historically, screen printing was printed with oil-based inks for their durable nature. The 1980s saw the emergence of effective water-based inks, which became important as print studios, universities, and colleges became more aware of health and safety concerns. One health benefit is the easy cleanup with water as opposed to needing solvents to clean oil-based ink off of screens. Water-based inks have distinct qualities that have become embraced as a new medium. The ink dries faster and fine details are possible. Water-based inks can be more transparent and when overprinted do not block out previous layers and blend to make new colors. This is Heather Day's screen print entitled Fort Wayne and is composed of 7 transparent layers of color that merge to form new shades and suggest a sense of space. Screen printing can be very low-tech and simple, making it attractive and accessible to students and amateurs. The process can be portable, adaptable, and even mobile. Live printing has been used as tools for educational activities at festivals and events, as seen here at Gravatalandia in Chicago and the Ways Goose and Printing Festival in Ann Arbor. There are also numerous printmaking workshops that have focused exclusively on the medium, creating virtuoso works like Coronado Studio, founded by Sam Coronado in 1991. Coronado began the Serie project and worked with over 200 artists, especially young emerging artists. He provided them with studio space, materials, and guidance. I'm going to end with Trey, an 11-color screen print made with 11 screens with stencils. In 1996, the realist painter Janet Fish worked with Norman Stewart, who is a master printer with Stewart & Stewart in West Bloomfield, Michigan, another printmaking studio that focuses on screen print. The Detroit Institute of Art owns a set of progression prints for the piece, showing the development of the final print. The museum was kind enough to share images of the prints with me. Inks of different densities were used, from transparent to more opaque. You'll see that through the layering and overlapping of inks, colors blend together and make new ones. So this is screen 1, and we have cadmium red is the first ink printed onto the paper. This color is used throughout the composition, in the glass bowl and the background. There are 60 prints in this edition. The entire edition is printed at the same time, one screen at a time. So for example, Norm Stewart printed cadmium red on all 60 sheets of paper. The screen 2, Magenta is added to give more form to the glass bowl, reflection, and background. Magenta peeks through in some areas. In other areas, it blends with the cadmium red, creating a richer, darker hue. A relatively transparent pink softens the background and adds the highlights to the colorful reflection on the table. In screen 4, a transparent light green provides the foundation for the leaves, vine, and grapes. Also, green appears in the glass bowl for shadows. In screen 5, the screen adds a pale light yellow. Screen 6, green provides a medium tone for the grapes and leaves, as well as accentuates the veins in the leaves and the vine. Green also helps make darker colors in the reflection. This green adds blue to the leaves, vine, and grapes, and select background areas. The blue blends with other colors. For example, blue with the cadmium red and magenta form purple hues. Screen 8, a transparent primrose light yellow strengthens the yellow hue in the leaves. It also bathes the glass reflection on the table with a warm light. A very transparent white lightens and softens many areas. Screen 10, this screen adds a transparent deep green, which gives a greater definition to the forms. The deep green provides more contrast and helps to suggest volume in the leaves, vines, and glass bowl. And screen 11, this last screen adds a transparent cool black, which punctuates the shadows. This further enhances the perception of space and depth. Thank you for tuning in today. I'm taking a hiatus this summer and will return again in the fall. You can check out any of the past print room talks and other recorded educational programs at on the Fort Wayne Museum of Art's YouTube channel, and also through our Facebook page.